At the time of recording, we're fresh out of a week full of news coming out of the Disco Elysium sphere of influence. In what seems to be a trend with Disco Elysium, we didn't just get one announcement, we got several. In this video, I'm going to try and make sense of who these so-called Disco Elysium successors are, and with that phrasing, I arrive at the first point of clarification. Disco Elysium Successor. What do we actually mean when we call something that? Well, normally you'd expect Disco Elysium 2 to be the only thing that could be a successor, right? Well, as that seems unlikely to happen, the community has taken to assigning that title to any new studio which was born out of the remnants of the original ZAUM development team. You may have also heard the term disco-like. That is something slightly different. If you think of it in the same way you'd consider Souls-like as a genre, that's kind of where we're at with the term disco-like. Basically games which are taking some inspiration from what Disco Elysium achieved, or at least set out to achieve, examples being Rue Valley, Glasshouse, Esoteric Ebb, Sovereign Syndicate, amongst others. We'll take a look at that bucket of games at a later date, but if you're keen to know more, then you can always head over to my channel or Spotify to check out the dev interviews on my Human Can Opener podcast. Now on to the successors themselves. The TLDR is that there are a total of 5 studios which have spawned from the courts of Proto-ZAUM, splitting a collection of artists, writers, designers and producers from the original Elysium team into competing gaming houses, seeking the adoration of the fandom like some sort of Westerosian battle for the disco throne. As it always is with ZAUM and Disco Elysium though, it is just important to know who's involved with the studios as it is to understand what they're actually offering as a game.
100 intelligence agents caught between its teeth. A crimson mist of deceit and paranoia. Conspiracy strangle this world. An irreversible ideology.
ZAUM, or Neo-ZAUM as I prefer to call them, are still the studio that own the Disco Elysium IP. They have announced a brand new IP separate from Disco Elysium under the project name C4. They have released one trailer for C4, which has the art from Fort Cabinet artist Anton Ville. Based on the trailer and the press statements from ZAUM staff, it will be a game about espionage more akin to Slow Horses than James Bond, and will explore themes around being an agent working for a morally questionable organisation, with the battle of the mind being as important as the battle in reality. The same studio have also announced an adaptation of the original Disco Elysium for mobile phones. Previously known as Project M0, it appears to be some sort of visual novel and is aimed at bringing Disco Elysium to the TikTok generation. It seems to be Android only at the moment and will include microtransactions. The company is quite simply ZAUM in name only, but they do have a few people who've hung on from the original team. So let's focus on the names mentioned in the context of C4 first. Sim Cosmos Cineme. Cosmos is an old friend of the original ZAUM crew and is credited as a writer and producer. I don't know too much about his actual credentials in that field, but honestly in the context of ZAUM, it should be assumed that all of these people are way better at office gossip than they are making a game, because that is where they have focused most of their energy in the last 5 years. But here's an excerpt from part 2 of my interview with Argo and Dora to give some context on exactly who Cosmos is in the story.
Man, this is one of those things like so much happened over the years, and there were so many smaller and larger betrayals that you don't really have time to process it all.
Yeah.
This one hurt. this one I unfortunately had time to process. This one was Cosmos. Cosmos had been a friend of mine from Estonia. He started out in ZAUM initially. He wanted to be a writer. Robert didn't think he was good enough to be a full-time writer, so we took him on as a producer in Estonia. But he also did some honestly very good writing. Like he was at some time for a time he was like a writer producer. He actually wrote majority of Idiot Doom Spiral. Idiot Doom Spiral himself, the story of a guy who loses his keys when out jogging, and then his entire life goes down to shitter. It's like a thing that happened to Robert one day. But based on Robert's retelling, Cosmos actually wrote it to Doom Spiral. He also wrote Piss and Fuck, the original versions of Piss and Fuck. I edited them quite a bit. I think Justin edited them in between as well. But Mega Rich Lightbending guy, that's also him.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, he did some good work.
Caspar Tamslu and Justin Keenan. Not actually mentioned in any of the news surrounding C4, but Caspar has been keen to promote the announcements and is still listed as art director at ZAUM. And Justin Keenan is lead writer at ZAUM. C4 was always his baby, and he's almost certainly still involved. Now, these two are faces you'll know very well, as they appeared in the now infamous PMG documentary on Disco Elysium. They gave what at the time seemed sincere stories against the practices of Robert Kurwitz, but according to Argo and Dora, they were the chief informants of Tonis Harville, Ed Tomaszewski and Phil Davidson, the ZAUM executive board. The ZAUM cult runs very deep, and I had to conduct a 16-hour interview to capture most of it, so I highly recommend you give that a listen. And then there's Disco Elysium Mobile, the birth child of Tonis Harville. Tonis Harville, the financial criminal, fraud and CEO of ZAUM, who likes to tell people his name is Dennis, is the main architect of Disco Elysium Mobile, just as he was the brains behind the awful Disco Elysium collage mode. This guy is the baddest apple of them all, rotten to the absolute core. He clearly has no idea or even the interest to find out what Disco Elysium fans really like or want. To champion collage mode and DE Mobile is the behaviour of a man with such disdain for the spirit of disco that he makes the studio and everyone in it completely unsupportable. Much of the fall of ZAUM is down to him and the way he runs ZAUM as a mafia cult, driving an obsession in the studio of hating any of the original ZAUM crew, especially Robert, Rostov, Helen, Argo and Dora. All of the people I have previously mentioned in lead positions at ZAUM earned it by bowing down to Tonis Harville's directive. He has turned all of the staff at ZAUM into a Robert-obsessed group of victims and perpetrators, and you have him to thank for this community never being blessed with more Disco Elysium again.
It was inevitable. It's on. You can stop it. Why did you cause this? An hour. Just one more hour. It's easy. You feel it on your wrist. You hear it with your skin. You don't even have to open your eyes to stop it. Your wristwatch. The alarm chimes, soft but insistent. You know it like the back of the hand it clings to. Told you.
Dark Math Studio is original backer and producer of Disco Elysium, Kawa Kenda's new company, which also includes Disco Elysium designer Timo Albert. Dark Math have announced a game called XXX Nightshift. They have released 2 trailers so far, a bunch of concept art, and have recently announced that they secured the services of a Grammy-winning composer to do the OST. It was also confirmed in the news that Dark Math had secured significant financial backing and can certainly fund an ambitious project. Founder and leader of Dark Math, Kawa Kenda, will be known to many in the community, seemingly an agent of chaos who seems to cause upheaval and madness wherever he lays his hat, not least with Dark Math. Kawa was the original backer of the Kurwitz novel Sacred and Terrible Air, and believed in it so much that he convinced them all to make a game in the same world. Sticking around through all of the ZAUM journey, it can't be denied that Kawa plays a pivotal role in the success of Disco Elysium. But he just seems dodgy. I don't have another word for it. One point in a back and forth of lawsuits against ZAUM and Ilmar Compass, before eventually selling his shares in the company. Ted Litchfield at PC Gamer had a great summary of events from Kawa Kenda's timeline. I mean, we're talking about games here, right? So the drama of these events will perhaps not be something that ever touches the production of XXX Nightshift, but it's worth being aware of whose pocket your money goes into. Timo Alba is very different in my view, and is actually the sole reason I still have support for what Dartmouth are trying to achieve. Timo is an award-winning designer and heavily connected in the entertainment industry, but above all, every interaction I've had with him and every account of who he is tells me he's a genuinely great person who wants to make something worthy of disco again. And then we have Longdue, have announced a new game called Hopetown. There isn't too much known about this game beyond concepts, but it's focused on being a journalist in a conspiratorial world, where, as you'd expect, the mind is your biggest weapon. They have also released several pieces of concept art and a trailer. They've secured the services of Disco Elysium narrator Level Brown and recently recruited one of the original Estonian ZAUM crew, Martin Luiga. Longdue Games is a new studio led by investor Riaz Muller, CEO Riaz Muller, a Forbes 30 under 30 millionaire who runs companies called Hyperion Dev, Cogrammer and now Longdue Games. That should be your first alarm bell considering they are asking for backers on Kickstarter, the platform for broadcast devs with a dream. A common tactic for these AA studios is that they go to Kickstarter trying to secure other investment by showing backer numbers as an interest in their game. This is one of many questionable business practices in the history of Riaz Muller. In fact, he's already been accused of scamming Cogrammer customers. Recently, FE Week announced that they'd been investigating Cogrammer with the following findings. An international company that raked in millions of pounds to run online coding boot camps in England tried to charge learners for training that was supposed to be fully funded by the government. An FE Week investigation has uncovered cases of Cogrammer Limited demanding students pay up to £4,950 for not recording a job offer after the course or face legal penalties. Most refused to pay after a Department of Education warning about his behaviour, but at least one unemployed learner handed over cash. Rishi Sunak's Conservative government allocated over £500 million to spend on its schools bootcamp programme between 2022 and 2025 to train up thousands of people in up to 16 weeks for industries where there is a shortage of workers. Cogrammer, which traded as Hyperion Dev and has much of its operation based in South Africa, landed contracts worth up to $22 million from the Department of Education to train students in England in subjects such as data science, web development and software engineering. It secured similar contracts from mayoral authorities across the country. Funding rules state individuals must not be charged for any element of the skills bootcamp. Cogrammer admitted to charging some students for the course when FE Week presented the company with evidence. A spokesperson claimed students had been offered an apology and promised to refund anyone affected in full, plus £25 in compensation. Make of that mess what you will, but there is a pattern which seems to emerge with Riaz that can only be compared to, say, Elon Musk, chucking lawsuits around and having utterly childish responses to any criticism across the board, despite having enough money to never care about anything ever again. Take, for example, Riaz Muller's response to the Disco Elysium community. As you can imagine, fans were quick to defend Argo's position in the lawsuit battle that Riaz decided to start, and he did not take it well. Using his bot farm, Riaz targeted any and all comments or posts on Reddit speaking negatively about him and Longdue, to the point it caught the attention of PC Gamer no less. In part thanks to yours truly, their announcements on Twitter were met with such criticism that several accounts were blocked and the post was deleted. The words Argo and Dora are now blocked on their Discord, and then this post appeared from Hopetown director Grant Roberts. It's quite a long statement, but one key thing to take from this is that, well, either Grant is as much of a liar as Riaz, or he's stupid enough to take on board what he tells him as absolute truth. This particular line, Longdue started last year as Riaz, Argo and Dora to make a spiritual successor to Disco Elysium. This is simply not true. Riaz has been trying to attach himself and Longdue to every single name in disco that he can, claiming to be best friends with them all in the process. Riaz is a talentless chancer trying to make a quick buck of someone else's creativity and seems hell-bent on ruining lives of people who go against him. This guy is not disco, and I would not give him or his company a penny. Red Info. Red Info is led by Robert Kurwitz, the author of Sacred and Terrible Air, original architect of Elysium, and widely credited as the brains behind Disco Elysium. We have Alexander Rostov, former art director of Disco Elysium, and there's also Helen Hinper, who is a lead writer on Disco Elysium. There isn't actually a huge amount of drama around the last two names, but questions have been raised around Robert Kurwitz, accused of toxic behaviour whilst working as the lead writer at ZAUM, not being the best people person, and in some cases allegedly being downright nasty to those closest to him. You have to make your own judgments here, to be honest. To me, Robert is guilty of being a human being. We've all been dicks at times, but we don't have a magnifying glass on it in the same way someone like Robert would have done, and the accounts have varying degrees of reliable source. What nobody can deny though is that Robert understands Elysium pretty much better than anyone else, and they have the Disco Elysium artist as well as one of the key writers, Helen Hinper, who brought us stories like The Working Class Woman. Whatever they do at Red Info, I'm fairly confident that it will be just as disco as we'd expect from the original creators. Then there is Summer Eternal. So, not currently in operation due to an ongoing injunction against founder Argo Tulik, this story actually has more drama than game at the moment, but as a result also has a lot of good faith from the fans than pretty much any other studio. Born and formed from the ashes of Disco Elysium standalone project X7, Summer Eternal came out of the gates bearing all the scars from their time working at ZAUM. Having spent years watching a bunch of suits turn their beloved studio into a cult, Argo realised how important it was to do business without people like that involved. Summer Eternal aims to be a co-op for the workers and the creators, owned and influenced by them and the fans. Almost a big fuck you to the systems that kept them grounded and suffocated their creativity. Sadly, one Riaz Muller, CEO of Longdue Games, decided in a bitter fit of petulant rage to sue Argo Tulik for an alleged breach of contract with his other company, Co-Grammar. The court saw fit to impose a temporary injunction on Argo, meaning he could no longer work or be associated with Summer Eternal. Argo started a GoFundMe to fight the legal battle with Riaz in court and to survive without the means to work. The GoFundMe was a huge success, and the injunction is due to end in April, so maybe there'll be more news on that soon.